Episode 3 is where the show stops being a little charming and starts being a little uncomfortable. I mean that, though, in the highest compliment, because this episode is all about consequences and not really the dramatic, everything blows up in your face, but really the quiet type of consequence. Every single character in this episode is living inside of a choice that they've made or a version of themselves that they've kind of committed to. And now they're finding out what that actually costs. If you're new here, my name is Vanessa. I'm a licensed therapist, mom coach, and podcast host. And this is Tea and Takeaways, where we watch our favorite shows and talk about what they're really saying underneath the surface. We're covering Your Friends and Neighbors Season 2 on Apple TV, episode by episode, and this is episode 3. Let's get into it. We're going to start off today with Hunter and Delilah. I have to start here because she's still reacting to her dad, Ashe, with surgical precision, if I may add. And she tells Hunter, my dad thinks he's a musician. He thinks he's a lot of things that he isn't, and he's really not that cool. Now, the really not that cool part is, every single teenager. But the fact that she can see right through him, that's Delilah really seeing her dad because she even says, my dad likes to flex even when no one's looking. And she keeps apologizing for her dad's grandiosity, which at this point we know is just becoming a pattern, and says everything about what it's like to grow up with a parent whose performance never really turns off, even when they're one on one. And when she throws out the line, he's like ADHD and unlimited budget. It's a bad combination. She's really not wrong. But then she is doing a little something when she purposely kisses Hunter and says, we need to do something about that girlfriend because she's really not wasting any time. So, in terms of the takeaways, Delilah keeps doing something in this episode that I want to name because I think it's really easy to miss, especially for her age. She's not just observing her dad. If you notice, she's almost managing him a little bit. She apologizes for him. She explains him to other people. She translates him, right? And that's a specific kind of emotional labor that kids of complicated parents learn very early on because then you become the so-called interpreter between your parent and the outside world because the world can't quite figure them out on its own and because they need the explanation because you're so grandiose on their own. That's not really a small thing to carry, especially for a teenager. But the humor that she uses behind it, the wit, the perfectly timed one-liners, that's not just a great personality, but it's also a coping skill that God probably refines at a very young age because it's easier to be funny about something than to be sad about it. Moving on to Allie. Allie shows up to her first day of work looking fantastic. Yes, she's nervous. And the first thing she says is, I was worried this blazer screams, my brother didn't think I was qualified for this job. The self awareness is there, and she realizes exactly what's happening around her. And yes, she also realizes that she is nervous about these private school kids. And I love the way that she talks to herself as well, because she says, of course, they're going to love me. Everyone loves me. I'm worried I'm going to hate them. Her whole approach to teaching is trying to get these kids to actually feel the music, and they just want her to teach the notes to get the A on the test and to move on, right? She lands on this. The job is less about me teaching them music and more about me teaching them to actually give a fill in the blank. And when Coop's doubt comes up, she doesn't let it go this time, right? She throws it in his face a little bit and she uses this example about rats. The rats live up to whatever expectations you set them up for. She says that she is the rat, and if he thinks that she's going to fail, then she probably will. And then she says, maybe it's time you let me find my own way out of the maze by myself. The takeaway here is Allie's rat example is actually a real psychological concept. It explains that the expectations people hold of us really shape our performance in measurable ways. When someone believes that you will succeed, you're more likely to actually succeed. And when someone is waiting for you to fail, then that wait follows you into every single room that you step into. And what Ali is naming here is something that's really important for anyone in recovery or anyone rebuilding after a hard season of life to see and to name. Because there comes a point where people who love you the most have to make an important decision. And that is, are they going to accept that new version of you or are they going to keep holding on to the old story as a just in case? Because more often than not, you can feel which one it is that they're doing and it does affect you even if they don't say it out loud. The maze metaphor is perfect because she's not asking Coop to stop caring. What she's asking him is to trust that she can find the exit out of the maze by herself. This is true growth in a person. And the fact that she can name it clearly tells you that she's probably much further along than anyone around her is really giving her credit for. Moving on to Elena. Now, as a fellow Latina and a fellow Dominicana at that, the scene with Elena's family celebration just hit a little bit differently because that's a Latina family for you, right? The food, the noise, the love that takes up the whole room, even if it's a very small room. I really felt that personally. And then Elena said something that really stopped me. And she said, "It's nice to finally feel like I belong," when she became a citizen. And that's the shot, right? She's happy, she's celebrating. And then immediately, I love the cinematography of it all. She's cleaning toilets. And the show just lets that sit there. And that's really the reality of it all. You can become a citizen, and yes, it's very celebratory, but you can still be defined by what you clean or what you do for other people, unfortunately. Coop got her the Cartier bracelet that she had her eye on, which was really nice. And she was genuinely surprised that he went to the store to actually buy it instead of stealing it. And that moment says something about what she's used to, maybe, or what she's come to expect from Coop, which says a lot. And then later on, when Coop tells her that the money from Nick's gym is actually going to get smaller, but at least it'll look legitimate, Elena says, "Well, that's F in America, right?" And that's the whole point right there. People outside of the United States often think that getting here, getting to the United States is the finish line, that once you're in, the streets are made of gold and the doors miraculously open and everything is good to go. But what Elena's story is actually showing us quietly, without making a speech or a thing of it all, is that belonging on paper and belonging in reality are two completely different experiences. Because she's got the citizenship, right? And she's still getting called Nick's housekeepers instead of by her own name. She still has a lot to prove and she still has to make a lot of money before she can even bring her family into the US. The system gives you the document, but then kind of makes you fight for everything that the document was maybe even supposed to mean. Moving on to Barney. The ultrasound scene with Barney and his wife is really something because if you've ever been pregnant at what the medical world calls advanced maternal age, and yes, I've been there personally. Oh my goodness. It's like to the point of offensive. It used to be called the geriatric uterus. Whoever came up with that terminology should be spoken to. And then even saying advanced maternal age, as mom, it makes you feel a little bit something. Barney's wife then asks the doctor and says, "Well, does the baby look poorly planned?" Which makes me laugh because that's a question of a true high achiever, right? And Barney comes off as a jerk sometimes. We've spoken about that in past episodes. However, this episode, we actually get to see a little bit of who he is underneath the performance of it all. He tells Nick to never apologize for working hard. He's obviously nervous about being a dad to a third kid. He's worried about being exposed, and he tells his wife directly, "I'm not working for your father." He could take the easy path and just work for her dad, just take his father in law's money and the father in law's approval and problem solved, right? But his pride won't let him do it. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The takeaway here is that this version of Barney's story looks like stubbornness a bit, but there's another version that looks like self respect. And I think that this episode is asking to hold on to both truths at the same time. The never apologize for working hard line isn't toxic masculinity. It's a man who built something for himself and refuses to let someone else's money erase that. And that's a man who knows what it means to earn something and isn't willing to give that up. And that's part of the concept of identity as well. Moving on to Tori, which feels like disappointment tour round two. She shows up, and the first thing she says to her dad is that. And honestly, again, the self awareness for this kid who's about 18 years old is pretty remarkable. Coop tells her that he doesn't want to change her mind, that he wants her to walk him through it. And something about that approach has her open up at least a little bit, right? Because she does mention film and she lets him know that she just can't be at her mom's anymore. And the takeaway here is that Coop did something in the scene that is actually really hard sometimes for a parent to do. And that is that he didn't lead with his own agenda. He said, "I'm not here to change your mind. I just want to understand you." And that one shift opened a door that Mel's pressure kept closing on Tori. That's the clinical line here. When teenagers feel like every conversation is just an attempt to reject them, yeah, then they will shut down. When they feel genuinely heard, though, and not just agreed with, but really heard and taken an interest on, then that's when they can start talking. Then Mel, on the other hand, is having a really hard week. It's a really tough week. The dog is peeing on her packages. She can't even like get out of her house. And then she tells Tori that she made some calls and that Princeton is still on the table. And Tori looks at her and said, "You don't even know where to stop." She really doesn't. And what comes next is one of the hardest scenes in the episode when Tori says, "What do you even do all day? Have you ever considered the mind blowing possibility that it's not all about you?" And yes, she's still being maybe a rude adolescent, but there's something when she says, "I think you lost the right to be a therapist when you chose to attack your husband's ex lover and got fired. I look at you and keep thinking, why would I want to be like you?" Again, she's being a tough 18-year-old, but she does have some ground to stand on. That's a whole lot of feelings in one room. Later on, when Mel and Coop have a moment, she shares feelings that probably a lot of moms have, and that is that moms give everything to their kids, and yet they feel like they're a fill in the blank with whatever colorful word that you choose. She tells Coop, "You were the vacation parent. You were always the one that said, whatever mom says, and the mom is the one that holds the line and that sets down the rules. And then look at where she ends up." And unfortunately, sometimes that is a reality, especially amongst households that do have separated or divorced parents, is that sometimes the mom is the more firm one and then the one that also gets walked all over on. She says, "I have these kids, they're my whole world." And then you realize that everybody leaves. Then who am I going to be? Some lonely old hag living in a big empty house? And we talked about that feeling last week. It's so important for couples, whether they're together or not, but for individuals and then as partners to really continue to cater to themselves and to take care of themselves while their kids are growing up, because our job is to really help them along the way, to be those coaches and then those cheerleaders from the sidelines. And one day they will leave the house and we have to be able to live with ourselves, to still entertain ourselves, to still have a partnership if we're in one, and to know what we want out of life. Our whole lives can't just be about our kids. So, to go on further on the takeaway, yes, Tori was brutal and most of it was disrespectful, but some of it was fair. Mel has made some mistakes, and Tori delivered that truth in a way that was designed to sting her. And then after that, that conversation that she had with Coop, we saw a pretty raw version of Mel. What she's describing isn't just about the pain of Tori moving out. Again, it's the identity crisis that's been building since episode one. Her body is changing. Her kids don't need her in the same way. Her career got derailed. The book isn't happening in the way that she had hoped. And now her daughter is looking at her saying, "I don't want to be like you." When we built our entire sense of self around being a good parent, about being needed, and about being the one who shows up, and then that person that you showed up for tells you that it wasn't enough, that's not just her feelings, that's your whole identity falling apart. And yeah, you blink and your kids grow up and then they're adults. And that is truly what it feels like. You don't know it until you go through it. When you're in the middle of raising them and you're suddenly at the end of it and you don't know how you even got there, that runs really deep. So I hope that you remember when the kids leave, because yes, one day they will leave, the relationship that you have with your partner and the relationship that you have with yourself are going to be important. So remember to nurture that as you raise them. So, everything we've seen in the first half of this episode is identity meeting reality, right? Ali finding out what it costs to step into a new version of herself. Elena finding out what citizenship is actually delivering on. Mel finding out what it feels like when the identity you've built on your whole life starts derailing and telling you that it's done. But now the second half of the episode goes somewhere that makes all of that feel so small by comparison, because Coop's identity choices are no longer just about appearances, right? They have some very, very serious consequences. So at the end of the last episode, we see that Ash caught Coop stealing his book. And now Coop wants the book back to return it, which the irony of it all. But now Ash really has got Coop by the fill in the blank because we see when he goes visits him at golf, he says, yeah, your fee is me not having you arrested. So it's no partnership of the sort. He's blackmailing him. And the question is, how long is this going to go on, right? And Coop knows exactly what he's facing, and he turns down Elena's next job. He's genuinely rattled. And then the part that really got to me is that he had to go to an auction to buy the book back, and he's buying it back from Ash to Ash, right? I mean, the thought that Ash has put behind this, the game has changed. The takeaway here, the moment when Coop gets all dressed up and feeling like himself again is a true psychological honest moment that the show did because it names something that is really uncomfortable to admit. And that is that sometimes the version of ourselves that we were trying to leave behind is also the version of ourselves that we maybe felt most alive in, right? The most competent, the most like we knew exactly what we were doing and who we were. The pull there is real, but it doesn't make it right, right? Pretending that it doesn't exist is sometimes how people end up back in the room that they were trying to leave in the first place. And here's what the consequence piece looks like for Coop in this episode. He now knows what he's risking. He looked it up. He knows the numbers. He knows who's in the room and who's not. And he knows that he can't play ignorant anymore. There's a choice here to make, a choice in deciding really who you are. What are you going to do? And what consequences will it bring if you don't make the choice? And even when you do make the choice. And Ash doesn't make it easy for Coop whatsoever. And we're seeing more realities to Ash. He's not just a, pin straight button up guy that maybe some of the other ones are, or maybe not. But we see him eating at the pizzeria. We see the reality of it. We see that he has his hand in a lot of different pots, it seems, and they're not all done with a lot of honesty or integrity. There are two things happening with Ash as a takeaway here that I want to separate. The pizza place moment with Sam is a moment in the episode that Ash feels genuinely human, right? Because he shares of his memory that he was a stinky kid, right? He shares the way that he grew up and now who he has become. And then the consequences that I mentioned at the top of the episode, this is what I meant because Coop has been playing a game that he thought he understood, and it turns out that he's now in a completely different game than he really thought he was in, one with much higher stakes and one with much more dangerous players. And he sees absolutely no exit. That identity that Coop had been building, the thief with a conscience, right? The Robin Hood with the 401k plan, the complicated guy who knows how to work a room, well, he just met something that he definitely was not prepared for. And the consequence of not deciding who you are, of keeping one foot in both worlds, that is something now that somebody else is deciding for him. Episode 3 is where the show stops letting anyone off the hook, it seems. Every single character is living inside the results of who they've been. And the concepts of identity and consequences really ring loudly, right? They were always going to meet. And this is the episode where they begin to, and I'm eager to find out where it goes to next. So here's what I want to leave you with this week. And that is not a question about the show, actually. It's a question about you. Is there a version of yourself that you've been performing that you already know is not sustainable? And when you answer that, what would it cost you to actually stop? Ladies and gents, that is your tea. Those are your takeaways. Drop a comment below and tell me which character hit closest to home for you this week. New episodes of Your Friends and Neighbors drop every Friday on Apple TV, and I'll be back next week with the next tea and takeaways. I'm Vanessa, and as always, in a world where you can be anything, you are always free to be mindful. Catch you next time.